Professor Kethrel looked at the application form on his desk and felt confused. The form came from a species called humans, from a planet named Earth. He had never heard of either before. The professor was one of the best teachers at the Galactic Engineering Academy on Centauri Prime. He had taught students from over 200 different worlds, but this was new. The application was strange. It was printed on some kind of plant material instead of the usual crystal displays or energy tablets that most civilized species used. The writing was done with some kind of liquid ink, which seemed very primitive. But what really caught his attention was the planet classification code at the bottom of the form. Class 12 Deathworld. Kethrel read aloud to his assistant, Narek. That cannot be right. No intelligent life has ever survived on a Class 12 world long enough to build spaceships. Narek's tentacles wiggled with amusement. Maybe it is a mistake, Professor. Perhaps they meant Class 2. But Kethrel checked the Galactic database 3 times. Earth was indeed listed as a Class 12 Deathworld. The planet had massive storms, ground-shaking earthquakes, exploding mountains, and temperature changes that would kill most known species. The database showed that Earth had been scanned by exploration ships many times, but no one had ever found signs of intelligent life there. Sir, Narek said, pointing at the application, look at what this human wrote about his building experience. Kethrel read the section about work experience. The human applicant, Jake Morrison, claimed he had built structures that could survive earthquakes, hurricanes, and volcanic eruptions. He wrote about these disasters as if they happened all the time. Most shocking of all, he wrote about them like they were normal problems that any builder should know how to handle. This must be some kind of joke, Kethrel muttered. On his home world of Centauri Prime, the weather was always perfect. The ground never shook. Mountains never exploded. The idea that someone could build things while expecting such disasters was beyond his understanding. 3 days later, Jake Morrison arrived. At the academy, he came in a ship that looked like nothing Kethrel had ever seen. Instead of the smooth, elegant curves of proper galactic vessels, this human ship was covered in thick armor plating. It had multiple backup systems visible from the outside. The landing was rough and loud, nothing like the silent, graceful arrivals of other species. Jake stepped out of his ship wearing clothes made from some kind of woven plant fibers. He was tall and had hair on his head, which was unusual among galactic species. But what struck Kethrel most was how calm the human looked. Most new students were nervous when they first arrived at the famous academy. Jake looked around like he was just visiting a friend. Professor Kethrel? Jake asked, walking up to him. I'm Jake Morrison. Thank you for accepting my application. Yes, well, Kethrel said, still staring at the strange ship. We were curious about your species. Tell me, is your planet really classified as a Class 12 Deathworld? Jake smiled. Earth? Yeah, she can be rough sometimes. But it's home, you know. Actually, it's pretty nice most of the time. Kethrel could not believe what he was hearing. This human was calling a Class 12 Deathworld pretty nice. Either the human was insane, or there was something very wrong with the galactic classification system. I brought my study partner with... Jake continued. Hope that's okay. Lisa Carter. She's really good with extreme weather engineering. A second human emerged from the ship. Lisa was shorter than Jake, with long hair tied back in a practical way. She carried what looked like a primitive tool bag made from animal hide. Like Jake, she seemed completely relaxed. Extreme weather engineering? Kethrel asked. You know. Lisa said, building things that can handle tornadoes, hurricanes, blizzards, heat waves, the usual stuff. Kethrel's 4 eyes widened. The usual stuff this human mentioned would be considered apocalyptic disasters on most civilized worlds. Centauri Prime's weather control systems worked constantly to prevent even small temperature changes. The idea that someone would build structures expecting such extreme conditions was revolutionary. "Well," Kethril said slowly, "let me show you to your dormitory. Classes begin tomorrow." As they walked through the Academy's crystal corridors, other students stopped to stare at the humans. Jake and Lisa seemed unimpressed by the beautiful architecture that usually amazed new arrivals. They made comments about how the crystal walls looked fragile and wondered aloud what would happen if the building had to survive an earthquake. "Do you get many earthquakes here?" Lisa asked. "Earthquakes?" Kethril was horrified. "Of course not. The ground is perfectly stable. It has been for millions of years." "Huh," Jake said. "That's weird. How do you test if your buildings are strong enough?" "We use computer models," Kethril explained. "They calculate the exact forces each structure will face and design accordingly." "But what if your calculations are wrong?" Lisa asked. "What if something unexpected happens?" Kethril stopped walking. The idea that something unexpected could happen to a building was disturbing. Proper engineering meant calculating everything perfectly so that nothing unexpected could ever occur. "Nothing unexpected happens here," he said firmly. "We design everything to exact specifications." Jake and Lisa looked at each other and shrugged. "If you say so," Jake said. "But back home, we always plan for things to go wrong. Buildings fall down sometimes. Equipment breaks. Weather gets crazy. You have to be ready for anything." As they reached the dormitory, Kethril realized that these humans might be more than just curious primitives from a distant world. They seemed to have a completely different way of thinking about engineering and construction. He wondered what other surprises tomorrow's classes might bring. That night, Kethril could not sleep. He kept thinking about what the humans had said. How could anyone build things while expecting them to fail? How could anyone live on a world where disasters were normal? And most puzzling of all, how could they seem so calm about it? He decided that tomorrow would be very interesting indeed. The next morning, Professor Kethril watched as his students filed into the engineering lab. The two humans sat together in the back, looking relaxed and ready. Jake had brought what appeared to be a primitive paper notebook and a writing stick. Lisa carried her strange tool bag, which clinked softly as she walked. The other students were more typical. Vexthari was a tall, crystalline being from Zerion, a low-gravity world with perfect weather. Her species had mastered delicate crystal engineering over thousands of years. Morthin was a gaseous entity from Ekmosia, where nothing solid existed, and all construction was done with shaped gases and energy fields. "Today's challenge," Kethril announced, "is to design a structure that can withstand a simulated asteroid impact. You will work in teams of 3. The professor paired Jake and Lisa with Vexthari, thinking the crystal being's advanced knowledge would help guide the primitive humans. He expected the humans to struggle with the complex mathematics and advanced materials science involved. "An asteroid impact?" Vexthari asked, her crystal face showing concern. "How large?" "The simulation will model a rock 50 meters wide, traveling at 30 kilometers per second," Kethril explained that most of the students looked worried. Such an impact would destroy entire cities on their home worlds. But Jake and Lisa were already talking quietly, sketching something in Jake's notebook. "That's not too bad," Lisa said to her teammates. "Kind of like a big earthquake, but with more heat." "More heat?" Vexthori's crystal body flickered with nervous energy. "The impact would create temperatures of several thousand degrees." "Yeah," Jake nodded. "We'll need good heat-resistant materials and maybe some kind of cooling system. Back home, we deal with house fires and forest fires all the time. This is just bigger." Morthin, the gaseous being, floated closer to the humans. "You speak of these disasters as if they are common occurrences." "They are," Lisa said simply. Last summer, my hometown got hit by a tornado, a hurricane, and a wildfire, all in the same month. We rebuilt everything and got on with life. The alien students in nearby teams had stopped their own work to listen. The idea that a single location could experience multiple disasters and still be habitable was beyond their understanding. How do you rebuild after such destruction? Vexthari asked. Well, Jake said, pulling out what looked like a handheld computer. We keep backup plans for everything. Multiple designs, stored in different places. We use materials that are easy to replace, and we always assume something will go wrong. He showed them pictures on his device. The images showed human cities with buildings that looked thick and strong, nothing like the delicate crystal spires of Zentari Prime. The humans pointed out features like reinforced foundations, flexible joints, and thick walls. See these support beams? Lisa pointed to a building. They're designed to bend without breaking. When the ground shakes, the building moves with it instead of fighting it. But that is terrible engineering, Vexthari protested. Proper structures should be rigid and precise. Rigid things break, Jake said gently. Flexible things survive. As the 3-hour design period began, the humans worked in a way that amazed their alien teammate. Instead of starting with complex calculations, they began by asking simple questions. What could go wrong? How could they fix it? What if their first solution failed? We should build the structure in sections, Lisa suggested. If one part gets destroyed, the others can still work. Good thinking, Jake agreed. And we need multiple ways to get people out. Emergency exits, backup power, maybe some kind of shelter area inside. Vexthari was confused. But the simulation only tests structural integrity. Why are you planning? For evacuation? Because, Lisa said, real structures have people in them. If our building survives, but everyone inside dies, we've failed. This was a completely new concept to the crystalline being. In her world, buildings were art as much as engineering. The idea that function should come before beauty was revolutionary. Working together, the team designed something that looked strange compared to the elegant solutions from other groups. Their structure was thick and blocky, with multiple layers of protection. It had backup systems for everything and was designed to be easily repaired. It is very ugly, Vexthari said honestly. But it'll work, Jake replied. And the people inside will live. When the testing phase began, most of the other designs failed quickly. The elegant crystal spires shattered. The energy constructs collapsed. The perfectly calculated metal frameworks buckled under unexpected stress. But the human-inspired design held. The outer layers were destroyed, as expected, but the inner structure remained intact. The emergency systems activated properly. The evacuation routes stayed clear. How did you know to plan for partial failure? Professor Kethril asked the team. Because things always fail, Lisa said. The trick is making sure they fail safely. The professor stared at the test results. The human approach had not only survived the asteroid impact, but had done so while protecting theoretical occupants. No other team had even considered the people inside the building. On your world? He asked slowly. Do buildings often get destroyed? Sometimes, Jake admitted. Hurricanes knock down houses. Earthquakes collapse bridges. Tornadoes tear up whole neighborhoods, but we rebuild them stronger. And the people accept this? What choice do we have? Lisa shrugged. Earth is our home. We work with what we've got. As the class ended, word spread quickly through the academy. The humans from the Class 12 Deathworld had not only survived the advanced engineering challenge, but had approached it in a completely new way. They had succeeded by expecting failure and planning for it. That evening, Professor Kethril found himself looking up Earth in the galactic database again. The planet was indeed classified as impossibly hostile. Massive storms, shifting ground, exploding mountains, and temperature extremes that would kill most known species. Yet somehow, humans had not only survived there, but had thrived. More importantly, they had developed an approach to engineering that was completely different from anything in the galaxy. Instead of trying to build perfect structures that would never fail, they built flexible structures that could survive failure. The professor realized that these humans might change everything about how the galaxy thought about engineering. The question was whether the rest of the academic community was ready for such a radical change in thinking. As he prepared for tomorrow's classes, Kethril wondered what other surprises these Deathworld engineers might have in store for him. 3 weeks into the semester, Professor Kethril announced the midterm practical examination. The test would simulate a reactor emergency, and students had to design emergency life support systems that could keep people alive during a crisis. Scenario, Kethril explained to his class, involves a fusion reactor leak in a space station. You must design systems to protect the inhabitants for 72 hours while repairs are made. The alien students immediately began working on complex environmental controls. They designed perfect atmospheric processors, precise temperature regulators, and advanced filtration systems. Their solutions were elegant and sophisticated, requiring massive amounts of power and perfect conditions to function. Jake and Lisa took a different approach. They sat quietly for the first hour, just talking through the problem. So we've got radiation, probably some toxic gases, maybe fire, Jake said, making notes. And we can't count on main power staying on. Right, Lisa agreed. And whatever we build has to be simple enough that scared people can use it without training. Their teammate Vexthari listened with growing concern. Are you not going to calculate the exact atmospheric requirements? The precise radiation shielding needed? We'll do some basic math, Jake said. But mostly we're going to over-engineer everything. Better to have too much protection than not enough. Over-engineer? The crystal being was confused. That is wasteful and inefficient. It's alive, Lisa corrected. Efficient systems fail when something goes wrong. Wasteful systems keep working. The humans designed what they called a bunker system. It was a simple, heavily shielded room with thick walls and multiple layers of protection. Instead of complex atmospheric processing, they used basic air scrubbers and stored oxygen tanks. Instead of precise temperature control, they used simple heating and cooling that could run on backup power. But what if the power fails completely? Vexthari asked. Then people use these, Lisa said, showing drawings of what looked like primitive breathing masks. They're purely mechanical, no power needed. And if the water system fails? Stored water and these purification tablets, Jake explained. They're chemical, not electronic. The crystalline being was horrified. You are planning for total system failure. We're planning to keep people alive, Lisa said firmly. Pretty systems don't matter if everyone dies. During the practical demonstration, Professor Kethril activated the emergency scenario. Alarms blared, warning lights flashed, and the simulation began. A computer voice announced multiple system failures, radiation leaks, and toxic gas releases. Most of the alien students panicked. Their sophisticated systems required precise inputs and constant monitoring. As simulated problems mounted, their elegant solutions began failing one by one. But Jake calmly walked toward the simulated danger zone. He picked up a breathing mask from his team's emergency kit and put it on. Then he grabbed what looked like a primitive radiation detector and headed straight for the reactor leak. What are you doing? Kethril called out in alarm. Someone has to check the damage, Jake replied, his voice muffled by the mask. Can't fix what you can't see. The professor watched in amazement as Jake walked into an area that the simulation said was flooded with deadly radiation. According to the computer, any unprotected person should have died instantly. The radiation levels are lethal. Vexthari cried. Not really, Jake said, checking his detector. This is about the same as we get from solar flares back home. I've worked in worse conditions, fixing damaged power plants. Lisa joined him, wearing her own protective gear. Together, they began examining the simulated damage, while the other students watched from what they considered a safe distance. Looks like we can jury-rig a temporary cooling system, Lisa announced. Jake, hand me that wrench. You're going to repair the reactor? Kethril asked in disbelief. Just enough to stop the leak, Jake said. The real repair crews can fix it properly. Later, the two humans worked together with the kind of calm efficiency that came from experience. They bypassed damaged systems, rerouted power through backup lines, and improvised solutions using spare parts from their kit. How do you know how to do this? Morthin asked, his gaseous form swirling with confusion. Practice, Lisa said simply. Back home, things break all the time. Storms knock out power. Earthquakes damage pipelines. You learn to fix stuff with whatever you have. But this is a nuclear reactor, Vexthari protested. It requires precise engineering and perfect conditions. All machines are just machines, Jake said, tightening a connection. They work on the same basic principles. You just have to understand what they're trying to do. Within 2 hours, the humans had stabilized the simulated reactor and restored basic life support to the station. Their improvised repairs weren't pretty, but they worked. More importantly, they had done it all without needing perfect conditions or complex computer systems. That was amazing, said Zorth, a slug-like being from a water world. But how did? You know the radiation wouldn't kill you? We didn't, Lisa admitted. But someone had to check. That's what hazard pay is for. The alien student stared at her. The idea that someone would voluntarily enter a dangerous area for money was completely foreign to them. On your world, Professor Kethril asked carefully, do people often work? In dangerous conditions? Sure, Jake said. Deep-sea welders, mountain rescue teams, storm chasers, disaster response crews. Someone has to do the dangerous jobs. But why would anyone choose such work? Jake and Lisa looked at each other and smiled. Because it needs doing, Lisa said, and because it's kind of fun. The professor realized he was looking at a completely different kind of species. These humans didn't just survive on their deadly world. They seemed to enjoy the challenge. They had turned danger into a career path. As the class ended, the other students gathered around Jake and Lisa, asking questions about their world and their methods. The humans answered patiently, sharing stories of hurricanes and earthquakes, of building and rebuilding, of facing disasters with tools and determination. You make it sound almost normal, Vexthari said. It is normal, Jake replied. For us anyway. Earth is tough, but she's our home. We wouldn't want to live anywhere else. That night, Professor Kethril wrote a detailed report about the day's events. He was beginning to understand that these humans represented something new in galactic engineering. They had succeeded not because they were more advanced, but because they were more adaptable. They had learned to work with uncertainty, to plan for failure, and to keep functioning when everything went wrong. These were not lessons that could be found in any textbook, but they might be the most important engineering principles in the galaxy. The professor was starting to suspect that the rest of the galactic community had much to learn from these Deathworld engineers. Professor Kethril spent his evening in the Academy's vast digital library, searching for information about Earth. What he found changed everything he thought he knew about engineering and survival. The galactic database contained detailed scans of Earth's surface, but they had been dismissed as uninhabitable. Now, reading them again, Kethril realized the scanners had been wrong. The planet wasn't uninhabitable. It was just incredibly dangerous. And somehow, humans had not only survived, Their butt had built a thriving civilization. The professor stared at images of human cities. They were built directly on fault lines where the ground regularly shook. They stood in areas where massive storms brought winds that could destroy buildings. Some were even built near mountains that exploded with molten rock. "This is impossible," he muttered to himself. But the evidence was right there in front of him. The next day, Kethril asked Jake to give a guest lecture about human engineering. The young man seemed nervous, but agreed. He had prepared what he called a basic introduction to infrastructure resilience. "Before we start," Jake said to the packed auditorium, "I want to show you some pictures of my hometown." The images appeared on the large display screen. They showed a city that looked solid and strong, with wide streets and sturdy buildings. But what caught everyone's attention were the signs of damage and repair everywhere. "This is after Hurricane Kate last year," Jake explained. "We had winds of about 180 kilometers per hour. Most of the power lines came down. Some roofs got torn off, and the harbor got pretty beaten up." The alien students gasped. Winds of 180 kilometers per hour would be considered a planet-ending disaster on most worlds. "But look at this," Jake continued, showing the next image. "This is the same area 6 months later. Everything's rebuilt, and we made improvements based on what we learned." "You rebuilt in the same location?" asked Narek, Professor Kethril's assistant, "knowing the disaster would happen again?" "Well, yeah," Jake said. "That's where the city is. We can't just move a whole city every time there's a storm." The audience was silent. The idea that anyone would rebuild in a disaster zone was beyond their comprehension. "The thing is," Jake continued, "we know hurricanes are going to happen, so we build for them. Our buildings are designed to flex in high winds. Our power lines are buried underground or built to fall safely. Our bridges are made to handle flood conditions." He showed more images, buildings swaying in strong winds, roads built on flexible foundations, and emergency systems that activated automatically during disasters. "But what if your calculations are wrong?" asked Vexthari. "What if the next storm is worse than expected? Then we fix what breaks and build it stronger next time," Jake said simply. "That's how we learn." Professor Kethril felt his understanding of engineering fundamentally change. These humans didn't build things to last forever under perfect conditions. They built things to be easily repaired and improved after they failed. "Now," Jake said, "let me show you something really interesting. This is the Golden Gate Bridge." The image showed a massive red structure spanning a body of water. It was beautiful, but it also looked incredibly strong. This bridge was built almost 100 years ago, Jake explained. It's designed to handle earthquakes up to magnitude 8.5, winds up to 160 kilometers per hour, and massive waves. But more importantly, it's designed to be constantly maintained and upgraded. "You mean it's not permanent?" asked Morphin. "Nothing's permanent," Jake said. "Everything breaks eventually. The trick is making sure it breaks safely and can be fixed quickly." After the lecture, Professor Kethril approached Jake privately. "I need to understand something," he said. "Your people live with constant danger. How do you function?" "How do you build a civilization when everything can be destroyed at any moment?" Jake thought for a moment. "I guess we just got used to it. Earth's dangerous, but it's predictable. We know storms come in certain seasons. We know where earthquakes are likely to happen. We know which areas flood, so we plan for it. But the stress," Kethril insisted. "The constant fear." "What fear?" Jake asked, genuinely confused. "I mean, yeah, big storms are scary while they're happening. But they pass. Then you clean up and get on with life." The professor realized he was looking at a species that had evolved not just to survive disasters, but to thrive because of them. Every catastrophe had taught them something new. Every failure had made them stronger. That weekend, Kethril invited Jake and Lisa to his home for dinner. He wanted to understand more about their world and their way of thinking. "Tell me about your childhood," he asked Lisa as they ate. "Pretty normal," she said. "I grew up in California, so we had earthquakes, wildfires, and mudslides. My dad worked in disaster response, so I learned early that bad things happen and you just deal with them." "Your father's job was responding to disasters?" "Sure. Someone has to coordinate the emergency crews, set up shelters, organize the cleanup. It's important work." Kethril was amazed. On his world, disasters were so rare that there were no emergency response teams. The idea that humans had turned disaster response into a profession was revolutionary. "What about you, Jake?" "I'm from the Midwest," Jake said. "We get tornadoes, blizzards, floods, and heat waves. My family builds storm shelters and emergency housing. When something gets destroyed, we help people rebuild." "You make money from disasters?" "We make money from helping people survive disasters," Jake corrected. "It's honest work." As the evening continued, Kethril began to understand that these humans had built their entire civilization around the expectation of failure. They had emergency services, disaster insurance, backup systems, and redundant infrastructure. They had turned survival into a science. "The thing is," Lisa said, "we don't really think about it as dangerous. It's just life. You prepare for bad weather, you build things strong, and you help your neighbors when something goes wrong." "But surely," Kethril said, "you must dream of living somewhere safe, somewhere peaceful." Jake and Lisa looked at each other and laughed. "We tried that once," Lisa said. "I spent a semester on a space station with perfect conditions. It was boring. Nothing ever happened. No challenges, no problems to solve, no excitement. Besides," Jake added, "Earth makes us tough. We can handle anything because we've already survived everything." That night, Professor Kethril couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what the humans had told him. They didn't just survive on their dangerous world. They preferred it. The challenges had made them stronger, smarter, and more adaptable. He realized that the galactic community had been wrong about Deathworlds. They weren't just hostile environments that prevented intelligent life. They were training grounds that created incredibly resilient species. And now, 2 of those species were sitting in his classroom, casually revolutionizing everything the galaxy thought it knew about engineering. The professor began to wonder what other surprises these remarkable humans might have in store for the galactic community. 6 months later, Jake Morrison and Lisa Carter graduated from the Galactic Engineering Academy with the highest honors in the institution's history. But their real achievement was much greater than any academic award. The graduation ceremony was held in the Academy's Great Crystal Hall, with representatives from dozens of worlds in attendance. Professor Kethril stood at the podium to present the final awards. "This year," he announced, "we learned that engineering is not about creating perfect systems that never fail. It is about creating systems that fail safely and can be quickly repaired." The audience of alien dignitaries listened intently. Word had spread throughout the galaxy about the revolutionary human approach to engineering. Jake Morrison and Lisa Carter have shown us that true engineering excellence comes from planning for disaster, not preventing it, Kethril continued. Their methods are now being studied and adopted across the galaxy. As Jake and Lisa received their diplomas, they looked out at an audience that included beings from the Galactic Engineering Council, the Interstellar Safety Commission, and the Federation of Architects. All of them had come to learn about Deathworld engineering. After the ceremony, Council Leader Vorthik approached the 2 humans. The ancient being was over 3,000 years old and had overseen galactic engineering standards for centuries. "Young humans, Vorthik said in his deep, rumbling voice. You have changed everything. The Council has voted to establish new safety protocols based on your methods. Really? Lisa asked, surprised. What kind of protocols? All critical infrastructure must now have redundant backup systems, Vorthik explained. All buildings must be designed to survive partial failure. All emergency systems must function without computer assistance. Jake smiled. That's just common sense where we come from. Common sense, Vorthik repeated slowly. Yes, we are learning that what you call common sense is actually advanced engineering philosophy. The council leader went on to explain the changes happening across the galaxy. The crystalline builders of Zarian were redesigning their cities to flex during tremors. The gas shapers of Atmosia were creating backup systems for their energy constructs. Even the perfect garden worlds were installing emergency equipment they had never needed before. But most importantly, Vorthik said, we are changing how we think about failure. Your people have shown us that failure is not the enemy of engineering. It is the teacher. 3 weeks later, Jake and Lisa were back on Earth, but they weren't alone. They had brought with them the first group of alien students for the new Galactic Engineering Exchange Program. 12 beings from different worlds had volunteered to study extreme engineering. On humanity's Deathworld, the group included Vexthari, who had become fascinated with human construction methods, and Morthin, who wanted to understand how solid matter beings could be so adaptable. There was also Zorth, the slug-like being who had been amazed by human willingness to work in dangerous conditions. Welcome to Earth, Jake said as their ship landed in what used to be called San Francisco. I hope you brought sturdy clothes. The alien students looked around nervously. They had read about Earth's dangers, but seeing the planet firsthand was different. The sky was a brilliant blue, but dark clouds were forming on the horizon. The ground was solid, but they could feel vibrations from underground activity. Is it always this unstable? Vexthari asked, her crystal form flickering with anxiety. This is actually pretty calm, Lisa replied. We're not expecting any major earthquakes this week, and hurricane season doesn't start for another month. The casual way she talked about earthquakes and hurricanes made the alien students even more nervous. Their first lesson came sooner than expected. On the 3rd day of their visit, a moderate earthquake struck the area. The alien students panicked, as the ground shook and buildings swayed, but the humans around them barely reacted. That was only a 4.2, Jake explained, checking his phone. Nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about? Zorth's slug-like body was trembling. The entire planet moved. Well, yeah, Lisa said. The planet's always moving. We just notice. It's sometimes. The alien students watched in amazement as the humans continued their daily activities. Traffic lights swayed, but kept working. Buildings flexed, but remained standing. People checked their phones for earthquake information, and then went back to their conversations. How do you live like this? Morthin asked, his gaseous form swirling with confusion. Like what? Jake asked. Oh, you mean the earthquake? You get used to it. Actually, it's kind of nice. Means the pressure is being released gradually, instead of building up for a big one. Over the following weeks, the alien students experienced their first thunderstorm, watched a controlled wildfire burn, and observed human emergency response teams during a flood. Each event taught them something new about human engineering philosophy. Your people don't fight nature, Vexthari observed after watching humans redirect floodwater rather than trying to stop it completely. You work with it. Fighting nature is expensive and usually doesn't work, Lisa explained. It's better to understand what nature wants to do and plan accordingly. The alien students began to understand that humans had succeeded on Earth, not by conquering their environment, but by adapting to it. They had turned their planet's dangers into advantages. By the end of their 6-month exchange program, the alien Students had changed completely. They no longer panicked during Earth's routine disasters. They had learned to think like humans, always planning for problems, always ready to adapt, always willing to rebuild. "I understand now," Vextari said on their last day. "You don't just survive on this world. You thrive because of it. Every challenge makes you stronger," Morthin added. "Every failure teaches you something new." "That's the idea," Jake said. "Earth's tough, but she's a good teacher." As the alien students prepared to return to their home worlds, they carried with them more than just knowledge about human engineering. They carried a new way of thinking about problems and solutions. Professor Kethril arrived for the farewell ceremony. He had spent the last month on Earth, studying human methods and writing what would become the most important engineering paper in galactic history. "I have titled it Engineering for Chaos, Lessons from Deathworld Species," he announced to the gathering. "It will be required reading at every engineering academy in the galaxy." The paper's main points were simple but revolutionary. First, that perfect conditions create weak engineering. Second, that expecting failure leads to stronger designs. Third, that the ability to repair and adapt is more valuable than the ability to build perfectly. "We have been wrong for thousands of years," Kethril admitted. "We thought engineering was about creating systems that never break. But humans have shown us that true engineering is about creating systems that break safely and can be quickly fixed." As the alien students boarded their ships to return home, they carried with them plans to revolutionize engineering on their own worlds. Vextari would introduce flexible crystal construction to Zarian. Morthin would teach his people to build backup systems into their gas structures. Zorth would establish the first emergency response teams on his water world. But perhaps most importantly, they carried with them a new motto that Lisa had suggested during a particularly difficult storm. "If it can't survive Earth, it's not really engineered." This phrase would become the unofficial slogan of the new galactic engineering movement. It would be carved into the walls of academies, printed on engineering certificates, and whispered by students facing difficult problems. 6 months after the exchange program ended, reports began coming in from across the galaxy. The Spire cities of Vorthic's world had survived their first major atmospheric disturbance in 1,000 years. The crystal gardens of Zarian had flexed rather than shattered during a rare seismic event. The gas cities of Atmosia had maintained structural integrity during an unprecedented solar storm. "The humans have saved us," Vorthic reported to the Galactic Council. "Their methods have prevented disasters we never knew we were vulnerable to." But Jake and Lisa weren't finished. They had established the Earth Engineering Institute, the first school dedicated to teaching galactic species how to build for extreme conditions. Students came from hundreds of worlds to learn the human way of thinking about problems. "The key," Lisa told a class of mixed alien species, "is not to ask, how can we prevent this from failing? But how can we make sure that when this fails, it fails safely? And remember," Jake added, "there's no such thing as a perfect system. There are only systems that haven't failed yet." The Institute's first graduation ceremony was attended by representatives from every major galactic civilization. The graduates returned to their homeworlds as certified extreme environment engineers, carrying human-designed emergency kits and human-inspired backup plans. Within 5 years, the human approach to engineering had become the galactic standard. The old ways of building for perfect conditions were abandoned. The new ways of building for chaos became the norm. Professor Kethril, now the head of the Galactic Engineering Reform Commission, often reflected on how 2 young humans had changed everything. They had arrived as curious students from an unknown world and had become the teachers of an entire galaxy. "It is ironic," he told his assistant Narek One,